September 15, 1881. Shadow Creek Ranch, Coconino County, Arizona Territory. Blood. That was the first thing Ayanna Blackwater smelled when she stepped into the narrow canyon between the red stone pinnacles of the San Francisco peaks. Not the blood of prey, the blood of a man. She climbed higher, using handholds invisible to anyone who had not grown up in these canyons. The Apache had walked these paths for generations before the white men came with their papers and their promises. Ayanna was 42 years old, daughter of Chief Delche, widow of a white trader, and welcome in neither world. The sound reached her next, the wet, desperate gasps of a man trying not to die. She pulled herself over the final ledge and saw him, a white man, tall and broad-shouldered, pinned against the canyon wall by 200 pounds of mountain lion. The cougar had him by the shoulder claws, raking deep furrows through flesh. His rifle lay 15 feet below, useless. All he had was a bowie knife that caught the afternoon sun like ice. He was losing. The cougar's jaws opened wide, aiming for the throat. The man tried to twist away, but the stone wall gave him nowhere to go. Blood ran down his arm in rivers. Ayanna had 3 seconds to decide. She could watch him die. One less white man claiming land that did not belong to him. She owed these people nothing. They had taken her husband Thomas 2 years ago, taken her unborn child, left her alone between two worlds that both despised her. 2 seconds. Her hand moved to the quiver at her back. 1 arrow left, her last chance to bring meat back to her empty cabin. 1 second. The man's eyes met hers, blue eyes bright with pain and something she recognized, the eyes of someone who had already lost everything that mattered, who was only still breathing because the body did not know how to quit. Ayanna's bow sang. The arrow punched through the cougar's skull behind the ear. The big cat went limp, instantly dead, before it knew death was coming. Its weight collapsed onto the man, driving him to his knees. Then the man pushed the dead cougar aside and looked up at her. His shoulder was shredded, his shirt soaked crimson. But he did not cry out, did not beg, just looked at her with those blue eyes and said, "I didn't need help." Ayanna descended with the grace of a hunting cat. She landed beside the cougar, pulling her arrow free. The man watched her, waiting to see if she would finish what the cougar started. Instead, she drew her knife and began field dressing the kill. The blade moved sure and swift. This was how she survived now. Hunt, kill, eat, survive another day. "Your shoulder says different, rancher," she said without looking up. He tried to stand, stumbled. "You're the Apache woman, the one who killed 3 cougars with just a knife." "4 now," she gestured to the dead cat. "I'm Jack Mercer, Shadow Creek Ranch. I know who you are." Everyone knew Mercer, the widower who lived alone with ghosts, the man who had not smiled once in the 3 years since his wife Sarah died. "And you're Ayanna Blackwater, Thomas Blackwater's widow." Her hands paused just for a heartbeat. "You knew my husband. He sold me horses, good horses, fair prices. I'm sorry for what happened to him." Ayanna said nothing. What was there to say? That Outlaws had shot Thomas down 2 years ago while she watched, that she had been 5 months pregnant and lost the baby that night, that no one would help her because she belonged nowhere. She finished with the cougar and turned to his ruined shoulder. "Sit. I can make it back. Sit or bleed out and die. Your choice." Jack sat. She pulled supplies from her pack. Yarrow leaves, honey, clean cloth. Her hands moved with practiced certainty. She cleaned the gashes, applied yarrow paste, wrapped the shoulder tight. Jack did not make a sound, just stared ahead, jaw clenched while she worked. When she finished, she studied him. 46 years old, hair more gray than brown, a scar down his left cheek, hands that knew work despite the tremor when he thought she was not watching. "Why did you save me?" Jack asked quietly. "Because I understand what it is to want to die, but have the body keep living anyway." Something flickered in those blue eyes. Recognition, the barrier between strangers cracking. "Your eyes," she continued, "they look like mine every morning. You lost someone you loved." Jack's hand went to the wedding ring he still wore. 3 years Sarah had been gone. 3 years, and he could not remove it. "How did you know? Small territory. big grief. Ayanna shouldered her pack. Can you ride? I can ride. The ride to Shadow Creek Ranch took an hour. The sun was sinking, painting the desert gold and crimson. Shadow Creek Ranch appeared as they crested a low ridge. 2,500 acres nestled against Mingus Mountain. The main house stood 2 stories tall, built of ponderosa pine. A large barn dominated the yard, with corrals spreading behind it. It was beautiful and lonely. An old man emerged from the barn, 65, lean and weathered. He took one look at Jack's bloody shoulder, and his eyes went wide. "Boss, what happened?" Then he saw Ayanna, recognition and respect and careful wariness. "Cougar," Jack said, "she saved my life." The old man studied Ayanna. "Pete Dawson, foreman." He extended a hand. Ayanna shook it. His grip was firm. "Ayanna Blackwater." "I know who you are. Heard you took down 3 mountain lions with nothing but a knife. That true, sire, 4 now," Jack said, and there might have been the ghost of humor in his voice. Pete grinned. "Anyone who saves Jack's life eats at our table. No exceptions." 2 more men appeared. One was Mexican, about 30, with kind eyes. Miguel Pete introduced him. The ranch hand nodded respectfully, but kept his distance. The other was a boy, 16, maybe 17. Tall and gangly with Jack's build, but different eyes. Where Jack's gaze held pain and memory, this boy's held resentment. "Ethan," Jack said, "help me down." The boy moved forward reluctantly. "You're late, again. I got held up, had a disagreement with a cougar. And that's supposed to make it okay." The edge in Ethan's voice made Ayanna's instincts prickle. "I'm sorry, son. I'll do better." "Don't call me that. You're not my real father." Jack flinched as if struck. "I know, but I'm trying to be." Ethan turned away without responding. As he walked toward the barn, Ayanna noticed something, a folded yellow telegram sticking from his back pocket. Pete saw it too, his face creased with concern, but he said nothing. Inside the ranch house was Spartan. Functional furniture, everything in its place with obsessive order. But there were ghosts. A rocking chair in the corner gathering dust. A door at the end of the hall that stayed closed, always closed. Pete settled Jack at the dining table while Ayanna rewrapped his shoulder. Miguel appeared with whiskey. Jack reached for it immediately, hands shaking. He poured 3 fingers, downed it, poured again. The tremor eased, but the pain in his eyes did not. "You should eat," Pete said gently. "You've lost blood." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine in 3 years. Jack's jaw tightened. "Pete, don't. Someone has to say it. You can't keep living like this. Sarah wouldn't want you to." At the name, Jack's hand clenched around the glass. His knuckles went white. "I don't want to talk about her. It's been 3 years, Jack. 3 years since the consumption took her. You have to start living again." "I said I don't want to talk about it." Jack stood abruptly. "Just don't." He walked out onto the porch, leaving silence behind. Pete looked at Ayanna with tired eyes. He was different before. Used to laugh, talk about the future. Then Sarah got sick, and in 6 months she was gone, and something broke inside him that won't heal. "Consumption?" Ayanna asked. "That's what the doctor said, but I've seen consumption. This was different. Hair falling out, stomach pain, vomiting. The doctor didn't know what else to call it." Ayanna's mind caught on those symptoms. They sounded familiar, wrong but familiar. Before she could respond, they heard voices outside. New voices, many of them. Pete's face went hard. "That doesn't sound good." They stepped onto the porch. 8 riders sat on horseback in the yard, silhouettes against dying light. Lanterns hung from their saddles, casting dancing shadows. The man in front sat straighter than the others, dressed finer. Dark coat, clean hat, expensive boots. He leaned on a walking stick even while mounted his left leg at an odd angle. "Jack Mercer." "Been a long time, brother." Jack's entire body went tense. His hand dropped to his revolver. "We stopped being brothers at Little Bighorn Nathaniel." The man smiled without warmth. "When you left me to die, oh, I remember." Ayanna's gaze swept the riders. Hard men. Guns worn easy and low. Her eyes stopped on one. 30s with a cruel mouth and cold eyes that lingered too long on her. She knew those eyes. had seen them 2 years ago on the Verde River Road laughing as Thomas fell with a bullet in his chest. Wade Hoskins, the man who murdered her husband. Her hand moved to her knife. Every muscle screamed to attack, to kill. But there were 8 of them. Revenge would have to wait. "What do you want, Cutter?" Jack's voice could have cut stone. Nathaniel Cutter held up a leather folder. "Just delivering paperwork. Seems your late wife took out a loan, $42,000 from the Arizona Territorial Bank. Due October 1st. 2 weeks from now." "That's a lie. Sarah never borrowed money." "I have the documents, signed, sealed, notarized, all legal." Cutter's smile turned sharp. "If you can't pay, the bank has authorized me to take possession of Shadow Creek Ranch. Fair market value. $60,000 minus the debt. Leaves you 18. Enough to start fresh somewhere else." Jack's hand tightened on his gun. "Get off my land. Is that any way to treat an old friend, an old brother in arms?" Cutter's voice dropped dangerous. "I'm giving you a way out. Take the 18,000 and walk away clean. Or keep fighting and see what happens. Fires, animals spooked, wells poisoned. Awful lot can go wrong when a man's all alone." Behind Cutter, Wade Hoskins shifted. The movement drew Ayanna's eyes. She saw Wade's gaze flick toward the barn, toward where Ethan stood watching. Wade nodded, barely perceptible. Ethan nodded back. Ayanna's blood went cold. "You have 2 weeks," Cutter said. "Think about it, Jack. Think about what Sarah would want." He wheeled his horse around. The riders followed. As they departed, Wade looked back, not at Jack, at Ayanna. And he smiled the smile of a man who remembered killing her husband and had enjoyed it. They watched the riders disappear into darkness. Then Jack said very quietly, "Everyone inside, now." They gathered in the house. Jack locked the door, checked windows. Military training showed in every movement. "Boss," Pete said carefully, "those papers, are they real?" "I don't know. Sarah handled finances." Jack moved to a strongbox behind his desk, worked the combination. "But she would have told me if she took out a loan that size." He opened the box. Empty. "They're gone. The deeds, the title, everything." "Someone took them," Pete said. "But who has the combination?" Jack's eyes found Ethan. The boy stood pale guilt, written in every line. "Ethan, I didn't, I mean..." "Did you give Cutter the deeds? He said I could have my own land. 40 acres, $2,000. He said you didn't really want me here anyway, that I was just charity." Jack's face went gray. "And you believed him. You never wanted me. You wanted Sarah. You wanted your real son, the one who died with her. I'm just the replacement that doesn't work right. That's not true, isn't it? You can't even look at me without seeing everything you lost." The words hit Jack like physical blows. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Get out." "Jack!" "Get out of my house. Get out of my sight." Ethan ran. His boots pounded across the porch, fading into darkness. Jack stood frozen. Then his legs gave out and he sank into the chair. His hands covered his face. "I failed him too, just like I failed Sarah. Everything I touch turns to ash." Ayanna stepped forward. She did not touch him, just stood there, present. "You did not fail Sarah. And you did not fail that boy. How would you know? Because I know what real failure looks like. I have lived with it for 2 years. Every morning I wake up and remember I could not save my husband, could not save my unborn child." Her voice stayed level. "But surviving is not failing. Surviving when everything tells you to quit is the hardest thing a person can do. You are still here. That means you have not failed yet." Before Jack could respond, Pete called from the window, "Boss, smoke." They rushed outside. The barn was burning. Flames licked up from 3 sides, painting the night hellish orange. Horses screamed inside, trapped and terrified. The smell of kerosene hung thick. "Miguel, get water." Miguel was already running. He reached the door, yanked it open. A wall of flame roared out. He tried again. A burning beam fell, caught him across the leg. Bone breaking, was audible over the fire. Miguel went down, screaming, "The horses!" Jack ran forward. Pete grabbed him. "It's too late." Ayanna was already moving, not toward the main door, but the side where a smaller door led to the tack room. She smashed through with her tomahawk. Smoke poured out. Inside, horses kicked at stalls. Ayanna went in. "No!" Jack shouted. But she was gone. 10 seconds passed. 20. Part of the roof caved in with a shower of sparks. Then Ayanna emerged coughing, covered in soot. Behind her came horses, 6 of them, stampeding to safety. She had cut them loose. She turned back. Jack grabbed her. "Don't, it's coming down. There are more. I'll get them." He plunged into the inferno, found 4 more horses, cut the ropes. They ran. A burning beam fell. Ayanna saw it through smoke, saw Jack look up, try to dodge, not fast enough. The beam caught him across the back, drove him down. He could not rise. Ayanna broke free and ran back into flames. She found Jack pinned beneath timber. Rage and desperation made her stronger. She gripped the beam and pulled with everything she had. It shifted. Barely, but enough. Jack crawled free. They stumbled toward the door together. The barn ceiling collapsed behind them, missing them by feet. They fell into the yard. Pete threw blankets over them, smothering embers. Behind them the barn became a funeral pyre. 12 horses dead. The structure Jack and Sarah had built, gone. They lay in the dirt watching it burn. Eventually, Pete helped Miguel to the bunkhouse. Broken leg, gray with pain, but alive. Jack and Ayanna remained, too exhausted to move. "This was Cutter," Jack said, hollow. "A message." "Yes. He burned my barn, bought my son, forged papers." Jack's hands clenched. "And I have no proof, no deeds, no witnesses, nothing." Ayanna sat up slowly. Burns covered her back, but she ignored the pain. "I found something, last month, when I was hunting near Red Butte, where Cutter camps. A bottle, small glass." She pulled it from her pack. The label was partially burned but legible. Arsenic, Paris green. Jack stared. "What does that mean? You said Sarah died of consumption, but Pete described her symptoms. Hair loss, vomiting, stomach pain. Those are not consumption, Jack. Those are arsenic poisoning." Understanding dawned, then horror. "You think Cutter poisoned Sarah?" "I think someone did. Someone who wanted this ranch badly enough to kill." Ayanna met his eyes. "My husband Thomas refused to help Cutter buy land 3 years ago. 1 week later, outlaws shot him. I saw them. I saw their faces." "Who?" "The man riding beside Cutter tonight. Wade Hoskins. He killed my husband while I watched." Jack's face went hard as stone. "The same men who burned my barn killed your husband and my wife." "Yes." They sat processing this. 2 broken people brought together by violence and loss. 2 people with nothing left to lose. "What do we do?" Jack asked. Ayanna looked at the burning barn. Then at the dark horizon, where Cutter's riders had disappeared. "We make them pay." September 16th, 1881. Morning. Dawn came cold and merciless over Shadow Creek Ranch. The ruins of the barn still smoldered, sending thin gray smoke into a sky that did not care. Jack Mercer stood in what used to be the doorway, his burned hands wrapped in bandages Ayanna had applied before she finally collapsed into sleep near the fireplace. Pete had taken the night watch rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness for more of Cutter's men. They did not come. Not yet. Miguel lay in the bunkhouse, leg splinted and bound. The break was clean, but the pain was not. Ayanna had given him something for it, some mixture of herbs she carried in a leather pouch. The ranch hand slept now, fitful and sweating, but alive. 12 horses dead, $5,000 in damage. The winter hay stores gone. The tack, the tools, the spare lumber Jack and Sarah had saved for 3 years. All ash. Jack walked through the wreckage, boots crunching on charred wood. Here was where Sarah used to brush her mare every evening, singing softly, in a voice like summer rain. There was the stall where they kept the foals, watching them grow strong on their mother's milk. In that corner, Jack had proposed to her, going down on one knee in the straw, while the horses nickered approval. All of it gone now. Just like Sarah. Just like everything. He found what he was looking for near the back wall, a metal box warped by heat but intact. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a photograph. The only photograph. Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, standing in front of this very barn when it was new and full of promise. Sarah wore a simple dress she had sewn herself. Jack wore his only suit. Pete stood beside them, grinning like a fool. Sarah's face smiled up at him from the photograph. Dark hair, kind eyes, the smile that had made him believe life could be good again after the horror of Little Bighorn. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the image. "I couldn't protect what we built. I couldn't protect you." The photograph did not answer. It never did. Talking to ghosts again. Jack turned. Ayanna stood 10 feet away, soot still streaked across her face. She had not washed, had not slept more than an hour. Her eyes were clear and hard. "She's not a ghost," Jack said. "She's a memory. Memories can haunt just as surely as ghosts." Ayanna stepped closer, looked at the photograph. She was beautiful. She was everything. "Tell me about her." Jack's first instinct was to refuse. He had not talked about Sarah in 3 years. Not to Pete, not to Ethan, not to anyone. The pain was too fresh, too raw, even after all this time. But Ayanna was looking at him with those eyes that understood loss. With the face of someone who had also loved and lost and kept living anyway. So he told her. "I met her in 1875. I had just come back from Montana, from Little Bighorn. I was 28 years old, and I had seen things that made me want to die. I was drinking myself to death in Flagstaff when Sarah found me." The memory came sharp and clear. Jack sitting in a saloon at 2 in the afternoon, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the glass. The nightmares had been worse then. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Custer's men falling, heard the war cries, felt Nathaniel Cutter's blood on his hands as he tried and failed to drag his friend to safety. She was a schoolteacher, came to the saloon looking for volunteers to teach reading to the men coming back from the Indian Wars, said we deserved a future even if we couldn't forget the past. Sarah Miller had been 24, then unmarried, considered too outspoken by the proper ladies of Flagstaff. She did not care. She saw broken men and decided to fix them 1 letter at a time. I told her I couldn't read, didn't see the point anymore. She sat down across from me and said, "The war doesn't define you, Mr. Mercer. You define yourself, just like that, like it was simple." It had not been simple. Nothing was simple after Little Bighorn. But Sarah had been patient. 3 times a week, Jack came to her schoolhouse. She taught him to read, to write, to believe that maybe he could build something instead of just destroying. Took me 6 months to work up the courage to ask her to dinner. Another 6 months to propose. We got married in 1876 right here on this land. It was nothing then, just scrubland and hope. But Sarah said we could make it into something. Said we could build a future our children would be proud of. They had worked like animals those first years, breaking ground, digging irrigation ditches, hauling lumber from the high country. Sarah worked as hard as any man, her hands blistering and healing and blistering again. At night they would collapse into bed too tired to speak, but happy. Building something together made the nightmares smaller, made the memories of war fade just a little. By 1877, the ranch was profitable. We had cattle, horses, hope. Sarah got pregnant that fall. We were going to name the baby Hope if it was a girl, Caleb if it was boy. Jack's voice caught. He looked down at the photograph, at Sarah's smile, frozen in a moment when everything had seemed possible. Then Nathaniel Cutter showed up. January 1878. A cold morning with snow on the peaks. Cutter had ridden in alone, dressed in expensive clothes despite his crippled leg. He wanted to buy Shadow Creek Ranch. Offered a fair price, he said. Jack had refused. This land was his future, Sarah's future, their child's future. Cutter had smiled that same thin smile he still wore and said, "Think about it, Jack. Think about what happens to stubborn men out here." 3 weeks later, Sarah got sick. It started small, nausea. We thought it was the pregnancy, but then her hair started falling out. She couldn't keep food down. Stomach cramps so bad she would scream. The doctor in Flagstaff said consumption, gave her laudanum for the pain and told me to prepare for the worst. 6 months. Sarah had lingered for 6 months, getting weaker every day. The baby died inside her in the 7th month. The doctor had to cut it out of her while she screamed, and Jack held her hand and prayed to a God he did not believe in anymore. She died 3 days after we buried our son, July 15th, 1878. Her last words were, "Don't sell the land, Jack. It's our dream. Promise me." And I promised. Jack looked up from the photograph, met Ayanna's eyes. I kept that promise. For 3 years, I've turned down every offer Cutter made. And now he's burned my barn, stolen my deeds, and I have nothing left to fight him with except rage. Ayanna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "The symptoms you described? Hair loss, vomiting, stomach pain? Jack, that's not consumption." The doctor said. The doctor was wrong. She pulled the small glass bottle from her pocket again. The arsenic. Paris green. "Those are the symptoms of slow poisoning. Someone was giving Sarah arsenic over months, small doses, enough to make her sick, but not enough to kill quickly, enough to make it look like disease." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. His knees went weak. He sat down hard on a piece of charred timber. "You're saying Cutter murdered Sarah? I'm saying someone did. Someone who wanted this land badly enough to kill a pregnant woman for it." Rage flooded through Jack then, pure and hot and cleansing. For 3 years he had carried the guilt of Sarah's death. Believed somehow he should have saved her, should have done more. But this was different. This was not disease or fate or God's will. This was murder. "Wade Hoskins," Ayanna continued. "The man who killed my husband. He rides for Cutter. I saw him 2 years ago on the Verde River Road. Thomas refused to help Cutter acquire land along the railroad route. 1 week later, Wade and 2 others ambushed us. They shot Thomas in the chest and left him to bleed out while I watched." She touched her stomach, a brief, unconscious gesture. "I was 5 months pregnant. The shock, the fall from the wagon. I lost the baby that night. Lost everything." Jack looked at her, really looked at her, saw the same pain he carried reflected back. 2 people hollowed out by loss still standing because falling would be surrender. "We have the same enemy," he said. "Yes." "Then we fight together." Before Ayanna could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Both turned hands, moving to weapons. But it was just one rider this time, a boy on a horse swaying in the saddle. Ethan. He rode into the yard and half fell, half dismounted. His shirt was torn and bloody. His face was pale, lips trembling. "Jack," he gasped. "They're coming." Jack was there in 3 strides, catching Ethan as the boy's legs gave out. "Who's coming?" "What happened?" "Cutter. I went to his camp. I was going to give back the deeds, tell him I changed my mind. But Wade, Ethan's voice broke. "He said I was a loose end. Said Cutter doesn't need me anymore now that he has the papers. He tried to kill me." Jack saw the wound then. A bullet grazed across Ethan's ribs, shallow but bleeding freely. "How did you get away?" "Ran. Took a horse. They chased me, but I lost them in Oak Creek Canyon." Ethan looked up at Jack, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought he would give me land, give me a future. I thought you didn't want me. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Jack's arms went around the boy before he could think, held him tight despite the anger, despite the betrayal, because Ethan was 16 and stupid and scared and still Jack's son, blood or not. "It's all right," Jack heard himself say. "You're home now. You're safe." "No." Ethan pulled back, gripped Jack's arms hard. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. Cutter knows you're planning something. He's gathering more men. Cutter sent riders to Prescott and Tucson yesterday. He hired more guns. 25 men total now, maybe more. They're all coming here by noon tomorrow. Cutter knows you're planning something. He's gathering more men. 20, maybe more. They're coming here to take the ranch by force, today, before the 2 weeks are up." Pete had joined them now, rifle in hand. "How many men? 20? Maybe 25. All armed. Wade said they're not going to wait for the law anymore. They're just going to kill you and burn everything and claim you attacked them first." Ayanna's face went hard. "When on noon. They'll be here by noon." Jack looked at the sun. It was already past 9. 3 hours. "We can't fight 25 men," Pete said. "Not with just us. Miguel's down. It's you, me, and her against an army. Then we don't fight them here." Jack's mind was racing, years of military training kicking in. "We choose the ground. We choose when and how. Where?" Jack looked at Ayanna. "You said your father is Chief Delche. Will he help?" "I don't know. I left the Apache when I married Thomas. My father said I chose the white world. He might not even see me. We have to try. If we can get Apache warriors on our side, we have a chance." Ayanna's jaw tightened. Then she nodded. "I'll try, but Jack, my father hates white men. He blames you for everything the Apache have lost." "Then you'll have to convince him I'm worth saving." They moved fast after that. Pete helped Miguel onto a wagon. The ranch hand was pale but conscious, his broken leg splinted. Ethan was bandaged and given a horse. They had maybe 2 hours before Cutter's men arrived to find the ranch abandoned. Jack took one last look at Shadow Creek Ranch, the burned barn, the house where Sarah had died, the land they had built together with blood and hope. "I'll come back," he said to the empty air, "and when I do, Cutter will pay for everything." They rode north toward the Apache camp in Verde Valley. The land here was rougher, all red stone and scattered juniper, the kind of country that had been Apache territory for centuries before the army pushed them onto reservations, and the ranchers carved up what was left. Ayanna led the way, following paths only she could see. Twice they passed signs of recent passage, horse tracks, fire pits, marks on trees that meant something to those who could read them. The Apache were watching. They had been watching since the moment Jack and his people entered their land. The camp appeared suddenly tucked into a canyon where water trickled from a spring. 40 teepees, smoke rising from cook fires, women grinding corn, children playing, men sharpening weapons and watching the approaching riders with eyes that held centuries of justified anger. A man stepped forward as they approached, 70 years old if he was a day. Tall despite his age, with scars across his chest and arms from battles long past. One eye was milky with blindness, the other was sharp as obsidian. Chief Delshay. Ayanna dismounted, walked forward slowly, hands open and empty. "Father," Delshay looked at her without warmth. "You are not my daughter. My daughter died when she married a white trader. Thomas is dead, murdered by white men 2 years ago. Then you are a widow. That does not make you Apache again." Ayanna's voice stayed steady despite the rejection. "I came to ask for help, not for me, for justice." "Justice?" Delshay's laugh was bitter. "The white man speaks of justice while taking our land, killing our children, breaking every treaty, and you bring one here to our camp and speak of justice." Jack dismounted slowly. He knew he was one wrong word from death. Apache warriors had appeared from nowhere, surrounding them with bows drawn and rifles ready. "Chief Delshay," Jack said carefully, "I am Jack Mercer. I fought at Little Bighorn. I know who you are, the coward who left his brother to die." The words stung, but Jack pushed through them. "I saved an Apache scout that day. The army had captured him. They were going to execute him as a spy. I let him go instead, risked my life to cut him loose." Delshay's one good eye narrowed. "Why?" "Because he was not my enemy. He was just a man fighting for his people, same as me, same as you." Silence stretched. The warriors waited for Delshay's signal. One word and Jack would die here, far from home. Then Delshay spoke, his voice like gravel. "The scout you saved was my son, Red Sky. He died 2 years ago of the white man's fever, but because of you, he had 2 more years with his family, 2 more years to teach his children the old ways before the sickness took him." Jack's breath caught. He had not known, had not even thought about that terrified young Apache in years. "I am sorry for your loss." "As I am sorry for yours." Delshay looked at Ayanna. "My daughter tells me you seek justice. Against whom? Nathaniel Cutter, a land speculator. He murdered my wife with poison. He burned my barn. He is gathering men to kill me and take my ranch today. And why should I care about one white man's land? Because Cutter doesn't just want my land. He wants yours too. He's buying for the Southern Pacific Railroad. If they build through here, more whites will come, more towns, more soldiers. They will push the Apache onto smaller reservations until there is nothing left." Delshay was silent, thinking, weighing. Finally he spoke. "If I help you, what will you give in return?" "My word. I will never sell my land to the railroad. I will stand between them and your territory for as long as I live." "The word of a white man means nothing." "Then take my blood." Jack pulled his knife, drew it across his palm. "I swear on my blood, on the grave of my wife, on everything sacred, I will not betray you." He extended his bleeding hand. Delshay looked at it for a long moment. Then slowly he cut his own palm and gripped Jack's hand. Their blood mixed and dripped onto the desert sand. "Very well. I will give you 4 warriors, no more. If you win, you owe me a debt. If you lose, we will take what is left and burn it so the railroad finds nothing. Jack nodded. It was more than he had hoped for. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You may still die today. As the sun climbed toward noon, Jack, Ayanna, Pete, Ethan, and 4 Apache warriors rode back toward Shadow Creek Ranch. They did not go to the ranch itself. They went to Devil's Bridge, a natural sandstone arch spanning Oak Creek Canyon. A perfect ambush point with high ground on both sides and only one way in. They had 2 hours to prepare, 2 hours to set traps, find positions, ready themselves for war. Ayanna worked beside Jack, checking weapons, placing stones for cover. At one point, their hands touched as they both reached for the same rifle. Neither pulled away immediately. "If we die today," Jack said quietly, "I want you to know. You gave me a reason to fight again. For 3 years, I've just been surviving. Today, I'm living." Ayanna looked at him, really looked. Then she did something Jack had not seen her do once in the 2 days he had known her. She smiled. It transformed her face, made her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with features and everything to do with the light suddenly visible behind her eyes. "Then let us both live," she said, "and see what comes after." The sound of hoofbeats echoed up the canyon. Many hoofbeats. 25 riders or more coming hard and fast. Nathaniel Cutter had arrived, and the battle for Shadow Creek Ranch was about to begin. September 16, 1881, Devil's Bridge, Oak Creek Canyon, high noon. The sandstone arch stretched 50 feet across the canyon, a natural bridge carved by water and time over centuries the white man could not comprehend. Below Oak Creek ran cold and clear over rocks worn smooth by endless passage. Above the Arizona sky burned blue and merciless. Jack Mercer crouched behind a boulder on the eastern rim Winchester rifle, loaded and ready. His burned hands ached where they gripped the wood. His shoulder throbbed where the cougar had torn into him just yesterday. Everything hurt, but pain was honest. Pain meant he was still alive to feel it. Across the canyon, Ayanna Blackwater waited with her bow. 4 Apache warriors spread along the western rim, invisible against the red stone. They had painted their faces with ash, and ochre become part of the landscape itself. Pete Dawson held the southern approach with his Sharps rifle, the kind that could drop a buffalo at 300 yards. Ethan crouched beside him, pale and shaking a pistol in his hand he barely knew how to use. 25 men rode up the canyon trail toward Devil's Bridge. Nathaniel Cutter led them, sitting tall in his saddle despite his crippled leg. Wade Hoskins rode at his right hand, grinning like a man about to enjoy himself. The rest were hired guns, the kind that drifted from town to town, selling violence to whoever paid. They expected to find Shadow Creek Ranch undefended. They expected to burn what was left and claim Jack had attacked them first. They expected easy money and easier killing. They got an ambush instead. Jack waited until Cutter reached the center of the bridge, waited until half the riders were committed to the crossing with nowhere to run but forward or back. Waited until he could see the arrogance in Cutter's smile, the certainty that he had already won. Then Jack stood up, rifle aimed at Cutter's chest, and spoke in a voice that carried across the canyon like thunder. "That's far enough, Nathaniel." Cutter's horse stopped. The men behind him bunched up confused. Hands went to guns, but no one drew. Not yet. They were looking around now, realizing they had ridden into a kill zone. "Jack Mercer." Cutter's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were calculating, searching for exits. "I thought we'd find you at your ranch. Thought maybe you'd burned to death in that barn fire. Tragic accident, that." "No accident, murder, same as what you did to Sarah." "I don't know what you're talking about." Jack pulled the small glass bottle from his pocket, held it up where Cutter could see. The arsenic, Paris green. "You poisoned my wife. Fed her death in small doses for 6 months while I watched her suffer, while our baby died inside her." Something flickered across Cutter's face. Not guilt, not remorse, satisfaction. "Prove it." "I will. In a court of law, with witnesses and evidence and everything your money can't buy." Cutter laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "There is no court for men like us, Jack. There's just power. I have it. You don't. Simple as that." "Then I'll settle this the old way." Jack chambered around. "You and me, Nathaniel, right here, right now. Let your men go. This is between us." "Is it?" Cutter looked around at the canyon walls. Where are your hidden shooters, Jack? How many do you have up there? 4 or 5. I brought 25 men. You really think you can win? I think I already won. Because you're here on ground I chose at a time I set. Because you're so eaten up with hate that you can't see the trap until it's already sprung. Cutter's smile died. His hand moved toward his pistol. I wouldn't, Ayanna's voice called from across the canyon. Her arrow was drawn, aimed at Wade Hoskins's throat. Your man dies first. Wade's hand froze halfway to his gun. He looked up, saw her silhouette against the sky, and his face went pale. The Apache horror. My name is Ayanna Blackwater. You murdered my husband Thomas 2 years ago on the Verde River Road. You shot him in the chest and laughed while he bled out. Do you remember? Wade's cruel mouth twisted. I remember. Uppity half-breed trader who thought he was too good to help white men make money. Had to teach him a lesson. Then let me teach you one. Her arrow flew. It punched through Wade's shoulder, spinning him sideways in the saddle. He screamed, clutched at the shaft, blood blooming across his shirt. His horse reared, dumping him onto the bridge stones, and then everything became chaos and violence and the sound of rifles echoing off canyon walls. Cutter's men drew their guns, started firing wildly at the canyon rims. Pete's sharps boomed once, and a rider fell. The Apache warriors loosed arrows that found throats and eyes with surgical precision. Jack fired methodically, picking targets, each shot deliberate and final, but 25 men with guns created a storm of lead. Bullets ricocheted off stone, whined through the air, found flesh. One of the Apache warriors cried out and fell tumbling from the rim into the creek below. Pete took a round through the shoulder and dropped behind his boulder, cursing. Ethan stood frozen, pistol unfired in his hand. A boy watching men die, unable to move, unable to think. Ethan, Jack shouted, get down. But the boy just stood there, paralyzed by fear and guilt, and the terrible understanding that he had caused this, that men were dying because of the deeds he had stolen, the trust he had betrayed. Wade Hoskins saw him. Even wounded, even bleeding, the killer instinct remained sharp. He pulled his pistol with his good hand and aimed at the boy who had tried to betray Cutter. Loose end, Wade snarled. The gun fired. Jack moved without thinking, threw himself between the bullet and his son, but he was too far away, too slow, and the physics of violence obeyed no man's desperation. Ethan saw the muzzle flash, felt the impact like a hammer blow to his chest, looked down, and saw red spreading across his shirt fast and hot. His legs went out from under him, the world tilted sideways. And in that moment of falling, of dying, one word escaped his lips. Papa. Not Jack, not Mercer. Papa. The word Jack had been waiting 3 years to hear. Jack's roar was primal, a sound that belonged to wounded animals and broken fathers. He vaulted over the boulder, running down the canyon slope toward the bridge, with his rifle firing until the magazine was empty. Then he drew his pistol and kept firing, kept moving, tears and rage and grief blinding him to everything except Wade Hoskins' face. Wade tried to reload. Jack was on him before he could. The pistol whipped across Wade's jaw, shattering bone. The killer fell. Jack followed him down, fists pounding, beating the man who had killed Thomas, who had just killed Ethan, who had poisoned Sarah through Cutter's orders. Ayanna was there, suddenly pulling Jack back before he killed Wade with his bare hands. Not like this. He needs to stand trial. People need to see what he is. Jack's chest heaved. Blood covered his knuckles. Wade lay unconscious at his feet, face a ruined mess. Around them the battle was ending. Half of Cutter's men were down. The rest had thrown down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. The Apache warriors moved among them, collecting guns, binding wrists. Pete sat propped against a rock, pressing cloth to his shoulder wound, alive and grimacing. But Nathaniel Cutter was not among the captured. Jack's head snapped up, scanned the bridge, found him. Cutter had dismounted during the chaos, was limping toward the southern end of the bridge, using his walking stick to compensate for his ruined leg, moving slowly but steadily, trying to escape while his men died or surrendered. Nathaniel Cutter stopped, turned. The walking stick fell away. His hand held a derringer, small but lethal at close range. "It's over," Jack said. "Surrender. Over." Cutter's laugh was edged with madness. "This will never be over, Jack. Not until one of us is dead. You left me at Little Bighorn, left me to crawl through mud and blood and Lakota corpses. They found me 3 days later, half dead from infection. Had to cut off my leg below the knee. I spent 2 years learning to walk again while you came home married, built a ranch on my suffering. I tried to save you. You told me to leave. You should have stayed, should have died with me. Instead you lived and I became this, Cutter gestured at his crippled leg. A broken thing, a joke. The man who survived Little Bighorn but lost everything that mattered. So you took everything from me, Sarah, my son, my ranch. Yes, because you need to understand what you did to me. You need to feel what I felt. Jack's pistol was empty. He had fired every round during his charge down the slope. He was unarmed except for his knife. Cutter saw this, saw his chance. The Derringer came up, aimed at Jack's heart. A rifle shot cracked across the canyon. Cutter's gun hand exploded in red mist. The Derringer tumbled away. Cutter screamed, clutched at the ruin of his hand, fell to his knees. Jack looked up. Ethan stood at the canyon rim, Pete Sharp's rifle smoking in his hands. The boy swayed, blood pouring from the hole in his chest, but his eyes were clear, focused. He had made the shot that mattered. Then Ethan fell. Jack ran, covered the distance in seconds that felt like hours, caught the boy before he hit the ground, lowered him, gently cradled his head. "I got him, Papa," Ethan whispered. Blood flecked his lips. "I got him for you. You did good, son. You did so good. I'm sorry for everything. For stealing the deeds, for believing Cutter, for not trusting you, loved me. I always loved you. From the first day, you were never a replacement. You were always my son." Ethan's eyes were losing focus. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "Tell me about her, about Sarah, about my mother." So Jack did. Sitting on Redstone with his dying son in his arms, he told stories about Sarah's laugh and her terrible cooking and the way she sang to the horses, about the day they got married and the first time they saw Shadow Creek, and all the small, perfect moments that built a life together. Ethan smiled, closed his eyes. "That sounds nice." It was. "And you would have loved her, and she would have loved you." "Am I going to see her when I die?" Jack's throat closed. He could barely force the words out. "Yes, and she's going to be so proud of you, so proud of the man you became." "I love you, Papa. I love you too, son." Ethan's breath rattled once, twice, then stopped. Jack held him and wept. Great racking sobs that shook his whole body. The boy who was not his blood, but was his son anyway. The boy who had made mistakes, but died trying to fix them. The boy who had finally called him Papa, just in time to say goodbye. Ayanna knelt beside them. Her hand found Jack's shoulder. She said nothing because there was nothing to say, just sat with him in his grief present and solid and understanding. Pete limped over his own wound, forgotten. Tears ran down his weathered face. He was a good kid, made some bad choices, but his heart was good. The Apache warriors had finished binding the prisoners. 14 men captured alive, 11 dead on the bridge or in the canyon. Nathaniel Cutter knelt among them, his ruined hand wrapped in cloth, his face gray with shock and pain, and the understanding that he had lost everything. A new sound echoed up the canyon. More horses, many of them. Jack looked up, hand going automatically to his empty pistol, but these were not more of Cutter's men. A federal marshal rode at the head of 20 mounted soldiers. Behind them came 3 wagons carrying townspeople from Flagstaff. And at the front, riding side saddle on a gray mare, was a woman Jack recognized, Martha Chen, owner of the general store, Sarah's closest friend. The marshal dismounted, surveyed the carnage with professional detachment. "Jack Mercer, that's me. Marshal William Pierce, Federal Court. We received a telegram from Tobias Harrington, attorney at law. Said there was evidence of murder, land fraud, and conspiracy. Looks like he was right." Martha Chen hurried forward, stopped when she saw Ethan's body. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, no. Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry." "How did you know to come?" Jack asked. "Your Apache friend." Martha gestured at Ayanna. "She came to my store 2 days ago, told me about the arsenic, about Sarah. I remembered something. 3 years ago, a man came in asking to buy rat poison. Large quantities. I thought it was strange, but I sold it to him anyway. It was Wade Hoskins. I saw him here today, and I knew. She pulled a ledger from her bag. I kept records, every sale, dates, amounts, everything. This is proof. Marshal Pierce took the ledger, flipped through it. His jaw tightened. This is enough for a murder charge. Multiple murder charges. He looked at Cutter. Nathaniel Cutter, you're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Mercer, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent. Cutter laughed a broken sound. Silent, I want to talk. I want everyone to know what Jack Mercer really is. A coward who abandons his brothers. A fool who couldn't protect his own wife. A failure who couldn't even keep his adopted son loyal. Jack looked at Cutter, really looked at him. Saw not a monster but a broken man eaten alive by bitterness and rage. A man who had let one moment of wartime chaos define his entire life. A man who had become the very thing he hated. You're right, Jack said quietly. I am all those things. I left you at Little Bighorn because I was terrified and young, and I chose my life over yours. I couldn't protect Sarah because I didn't see the poison until it was too late. I failed Ethan in 100 small ways that drove him to make a terrible choice. He stood still, holding Ethan's body. But I'm also the man who tried to drag you to safety when you were wounded, the man who spent 6 months caring for Sarah while she died, the man who took in an orphan boy and loved him as a son. I'm not just my failures, Nathaniel, and neither are you. Don't you dare pity me. I don't pity you. I'm just tired of hating you, tired of letting Little Bighorn define everything I am. Sarah wouldn't want me to live like that. And Ethan deserves better than a father still fighting old wars. Marshal Pierce nodded to his men. Take them all into custody. We'll sort out who did what in court. As the soldiers led the prisoners away, Jack carried Ethan's body to one of the wagons, laid him down gently, arranged his arms across his chest. The boy looked peaceful now, younger than his 16 years, just a child who had made a mistake and paid the ultimate price. Ayanna stood beside Jack. He died a hero. He saved your life. He saved more than that. He gave me a reason to keep living. Jack looked at her. You both did. The sun was sinking toward the western peaks, painting the canyon in shades of gold and crimson. The same colors as the night they had met. Was it only 2 days ago? It felt like a lifetime. Pete limped over his shoulder, properly bandaged now by one of the Apache warriors. What now, boss? Jack looked at the ruins of Cutter's ambush, at the federal marshal taking statements, at Martha Chen showing her ledger to anyone who would look, at Chief Delshay's warriors collecting their dead with silent dignity. Now we bury our dead, Jack said. We testify in court. We make sure Cutter and every man who rode with him faces justice. And then, he trailed off. And then what? Go back to Shadow Creek Ranch with its burned barn and empty house, live alone with ghosts and memories, and the weight of all he had lost. Ayanna's hand found his, squeezed gently, and then we rebuild, together. Jack looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and burned, hers strong and certain, two broken people who had found each other in the wreckage of their lives. Together, he repeated, and for the first time in 3 years, Jack Mercer allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be life after loss. That maybe the future did not have to be defined by the past, that maybe broken things could heal if given time and care and someone willing to help carry the weight. The marshal approached. We'll need you to come to Flagstaff. Give testimony. It'll take a few days. I'll be there. And the boy? The marshal gestured at Ethan. He's coming home with me, to Shadow Creek Ranch, to be buried next to Sarah, where he belongs. As the sun set over Devil's Bridge, Jack Mercer stood with Ayanna Blackwater and watched the last light fade from the Arizona sky. Behind them, justice was being served. Ahead, an uncertain future waited. But for now, in this moment, they were alive. And that was enough. September 18th, 1881. Shadow Creek Ranch. The grave stood on a low hill overlooking the valley next to another grave that had waited 3 years for company. Sarah Mercer's headstone was simple granite weathered already by desert wind and sun. The inscription read, Sarah Elizabeth Mercer, 1851 to 1878, beloved wife, in God's hands now. Beside it, fresher earth marked where Ethan Mercer lay. His stone was newer, the carving still sharp and clean. Ethan James Mercer, 1865 to 1881. Beloved son, he died saving his father. Jack stood between the two graves, hat in his hands, while Reverend Thomas from Flagstaff spoke words about sacrifice and redemption and the mysterious ways of God. 20 people had come from town for the funeral. More than Jack expected. Pete stood to his right arm in a sling from the shoulder wound. Miguel leaned on crutches, his broken leg still healing. Ayanna stood to Jack's left, silent and present. Chief Delche had come too with 4 Apache elders. They stood apart from the white mourners, but they had come. That meant something. The warrior who died at Devil's Bridge had been honored in Apache ceremony 2 days ago. Delche's presence here acknowledged that Ethan's death mattered too. That blood spilled in common cause created bonds stronger than old hatreds. The Reverend finished speaking. People began filing past, offering condolences that all sounded the same. He was so young. Such a tragedy. He's in a better place now. Jack nodded and thanked them, and felt nothing. The grief was too large for words, too deep for platitudes. Martha Chen stopped longer than the others. She had testified at the preliminary hearing yesterday, her ledger entries damning Cutter more thoroughly than any witness statement. Sarah loved that boy, she said quietly. She used to talk about adopting him, officially making it legal. She would be so proud of who he became at the end. Thank you for coming, for everything. Sarah was my dearest friend. Helping bring her killer to justice is the least I could do. Martha glanced at Ayanna, then back to Jack. She would want you to be happy again, you know. She wasn't the kind of woman who'd want you mourning forever. After everyone else had left, Jack remained, just him and Ayanna, and the 2 graves, and the wind moving through the grass. I keep thinking I should have seen it earlier, Jack said. The signs with Ethan, the anger, the distance. If I'd paid more attention, maybe he wouldn't have been vulnerable to Cutter's lies. Or maybe he was 16 and made a bad choice like every 16-year-old does. The difference is, most bad choices don't end in death. Ayanna knelt, placed a small bundle of sage on Ethan's grave. An Apache tradition. He came back, Jack. When it mattered, he chose you. That's what you need to remember. He called me Papa right at the end. I'd been waiting 3 years to hear that word. Then those were the most important 3 seconds of his life. And yours. Jack looked at Sarah's grave. For 3 years, he had come here every week to talk to stone and dirt, to apologize for failing her, for not seeing the poison, for surviving when she did not. But standing here now, he realized something had changed. The guilt was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed everything else. I'm going to find a way forward, he said to Sarah's headstone. I'm going to rebuild the ranch. I'm going to make sure Cutter pays for what he did, and I'm going to try to live again instead of just surviving. I hope that's all right with you. The stone did not answer. The dead never did. But somehow, standing in the afternoon sun, with Ayanna beside him, Jack felt something like permission settling over his shoulders. Sarah had loved life too much to want him trapped in death. She would want him to heal. Come on, Ayanna said gently. There's work to do. They walked back down the hill together. The ranch spread below them, broken but still standing. The burned skeleton of the barn dominated the yard, black timbers reaching toward the sky like accusing fingers. But the house remained intact. The bunkhouse, the corrals, the well. The land itself was unchanged, indifferent to human drama. Pete met them at the main house. Marshal Pierce sent word. The trial's set for next week. They want you both to testify. We'll be there, Jack said. Also, some folks from town want to help with the barn raising. Word's gotten around about what Cutter did, about Sarah. People are angry. They want to make it right. Jack felt something crack in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. For 3 years he had isolated himself, convinced that accepting help meant admitting weakness. But standing here now, looking at the wreckage of what he and Sarah had built, he understood that no man could carry everything alone. Tell them yes. Tell them thank you. Over the next 3 days, Shadow Creek Ranch transformed. 20 men from Flagstaff and the surrounding ranches came with lumber and tools and strong backs. They cleared the burned barn, salvaged what could be saved, began framing a new structure. Women brought food enough to feed an army. Children ran in the yard, their laughter strange and wonderful after years of silence. Jack worked alongside them, hammering nails, sawing boards. His burned hands protested, but he pushed through the pain. This was penance and therapy both. Every nail driven was a step away from the man who had sat alone in darkness for 3 years. Every board raised was a declaration that Cutter had not won, that destruction could be answered with creation. Ayanna worked too, but differently. She tended the injured, treated Pete's infected shoulder wound with poultices that smelled of earth and growing things. She taught the ranch hands which plants could heal and which could kill. The men were wary of her at first. An Apache woman, a widow, someone who existed between worlds, but she won them over with competence and quiet strength. On the 4th day, Dr. Samuel Thorne arrived from Flagstaff. He was 58, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much suffering. He found Jack working on the barn roof. "Mr. Mercer, might I have a word?" They sat on the porch while afternoon heat pressed down like a physical weight. Dr. Thorne pulled papers from his bag, spread them on the table between them. "I've been going through my records from 1878, when your wife Sarah was my patient. At the time I diagnosed consumption because her symptoms seemed to fit: wasting, weakness, persistent cough. But Martha Chen's testimony about the arsenic purchases made me reconsider." He pointed to his notes. "Looking back now with new eyes, the symptoms align perfectly with chronic arsenic poisoning. The hair loss, the gastrointestinal distress, the neurological symptoms. I missed it completely. I failed her, and I failed you." Jack studied the old doctor's face. Saw genuine anguish there. "You couldn't have known. Cutter was careful. He made it look like disease." "I should have known. I'm a physician. It's my job to see what others miss." Dr. Thorne's hands trembled slightly as he gathered his papers. "I'll be testifying at the trial. I'll tell them everything. It won't bring Sarah back, but maybe it will help ensure Cutter hangs." After the doctor left, Jack sat alone with his thoughts. 3 years. 3 years believing Sarah had died of natural causes, tragic but unavoidable. 3 years of guilt for not being able to save her from consumption's grip. And all that time she had been murdered, slowly, deliberately, cruelly. The rage came then, not the hot, explosive anger of Devil's Bridge, but something colder and more sustainable. A determination that Cutter would face every consequence of his actions, that Sarah's death would not be forgotten or dismissed, that justice, real justice, would be served. Ayanna found him there as sunset painted the sky crimson and gold. She sat beside him without speaking, just present. They had developed this pattern over the past days. Comfortable silence punctuated by conversation when words were needed. "The barn will be finished tomorrow," she said eventually. "Better than the old one, Pete says." Sarah would have liked that. She always said every disaster was an opportunity if you looked at it right. She sounds like she was wise. She was. Young but wise. She saw potential in people nobody else believed in. Broken soldiers, orphan boys' land that everyone said was too hard to farm. She made me believe I could be more than my worst day. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. Then, "What was your worst day?" Jack had never told anyone the full story of Little Bighorn. Not Pete, not Sarah, not Ethan. But sitting here in the dying light with this woman who had saved his life and fought beside him and understood loss in ways few people could, the words came. June 25th, 1876. We rode into the valley not knowing how many Lakota and Cheyenne were camped there. Custer divided the regiment, thought we could hit them from 3 sides, but there weren't hundreds of warriors. There were thousands. The memories came sharp and terrible. The sound of war cries echoing off the hills. The smell of gunpowder and blood and horses screaming. Men falling all around, cut down by arrows and bullets and sheer overwhelming numbers. Nathaniel Cutter was my closest friend in the regiment. We'd served together for 2 years, watched each other's backs through a dozen skirmishes. When he took an arrow through the thigh and couldn't walk, I tried to carry him. But we were being overrun. The order came to retreat. Everyone who could move was running. Jack's voice cracked. Even after 5 years, the choice still haunted him. Cutter was screaming at me to leave him to save myself, said there was no point in both of us dying. I tried to drag him anyway, but I was wounded 2 shots through the shoulder. I couldn't manage his weight and my rifle and the retreat all at once. So I made a choice. I let go. I ran. And I've been living with that choice ever since. You saved your own life, Ayanna said quietly. That's not cowardice. That's survival. Cutter doesn't see it that way. He spent 5 years believing I abandoned him, that I chose my life over his without hesitation. And maybe he's right. Maybe in that moment I was a coward. Or maybe you were a 23-year-old boy in the middle of a massacre making an impossible choice with no good options. Ayanna turned to face him. I know about impossible choices, Jack. When the outlaws shot Thomas, I had 3 seconds to decide. Stay and fight, and probably die or run, and maybe save our unborn baby. I ran, and I still lost the baby anyway from the shock and the fall. For 2 years I've wondered if I should have stayed, if I should have tried to help Thomas, even though he was already dead. That's different. Is it? We both made the choice to survive when someone we loved was dying. We both carry guilt for it. But guilt doesn't change the past. It just poisons the present. They sat in silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Jack thought about Sarah, about Ethan, about all the ways he had failed, and all the ways he had tried to make amends. Thought about Cutter eaten alive by bitterness until murder seemed justified. Thought about the thin line between survivor's guilt and self-destruction. How do you let it go? He asked. The guilt, you don't, not completely, but you learn to carry it differently. You choose to honor the dead by living well instead of dying slowly. Ayanna's hand found his in the darkness. You choose to build instead of destroy, to love instead of hate, to hope instead of despair. Her hand was warm and calloused and real. Jack held it like a lifeline. When this is over, he said slowly, when the trial is finished and Cutter is sentenced and the barn is rebuilt, I want to ask you something important, but not yet, not while everything is still chaos. I'll wait, Ayanna said. And there was a promise in those words that had nothing to do with time, and everything to do with patience and understanding and the slow, careful work of healing. The next day the new barn stood complete, larger than the old one, with better ventilation, and a hayloft that could store twice as much feed. The men who built it refused payment. Consider it our apology for not seeing what Cutter was sooner, said Tom Jenkins, owner of the feed store. Sarah deserved better from this town. That night they held a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just coffee and pie, and people sitting together in the twilight. Stories were told about Sarah, memories shared. Jack heard things he had not known, how Sarah had secretly paid the school fees for 3 children whose parents could not afford it, how she had organized a food drive for families hit by the drought of '77, how she had been universally loved for her kindness and her spine of steel. She stood up to the railroad surveyors when they tried to cut through the Hendersons' property, Martha Chen recalled. Told them in very unladylike language exactly where they could put their survey stakes. They left and never came back. Everyone laughed. Even Jack managed to smile. These stories were gifts, pieces of Sarah he had never known, proof that her life had mattered beyond just what she meant to him. As people began departing, Pete pulled Jack aside. Got something to show you. He led Jack to the new barn, to a corner where a wooden plaque had been mounted. The carving was simple but beautiful. Sarah's barn, built 1881 by friends and neighbors in memory of a woman who made this valley better. Jack's voice caught. He could not speak, just traced the letters with his fingers and felt the weight of community of people who remembered of a legacy that death could not erase. She'd be proud of you, boss, Pete said. Proud of how you're rebuilding, proud of how you fought for justice, proud of how you're learning to live again. I hope so. I know so. And I think she'd approve of Ayanna too. Jack looked at his old friend sharply. What makes you say that? Because Sarah always said you needed someone strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you. Someone who could match you strength for strength. Ayanna's that person. Anyone with eyes can see it. Before Jack could respond, a rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast, urgent. As he drew closer, Jack recognized Deputy Marshal Hendricks from Flagstaff. Mr. Mercer, I need you in town immediately. What's wrong? It's Cutter. He's agreed to plead guilty to all charges, but he'll only do it if you're there to hear his confession. Says he owes you the truth. Says it's time to stop lying. Jack looked at Pete, at Ayanna, who had emerged from the house at the new barn standing solid against the night sky. Then let's go hear what the truth sounds like, he said. They rode through darkness, reaching Flagstaff just after midnight. The jail was a squat adobe building that smelled of sweat and despair. Marshal Pierce met them at the door. He's in the back cell. Been asking for you since sundown. Won't talk to anyone else. Nathaniel Cutter sat on a wooden bench, his ruined hand wrapped in bandages. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by defeat and the certainty of death. When he saw Jack, something flickered in his eyes. Not quite remorse, but perhaps the beginning of it. Jack, thank you for coming. The marshal said you wanted to confess. I wanted to tell you the truth, all of it. No more lies, no more justifications. You deserve that much. Jack pulled a chair close to the cell bars, sat down. Ayanna stood behind him, silent witness. Marshal Pierce positioned himself where he could take notes. Cutter began speaking, and the story that emerged was uglier than Jack had imagined. The arsenic had started 6 months before Sarah died, small doses mixed into sugar or flour or anything Cutter could contaminate when he visited the ranch on the pretense of neighborly calls. He had researched the symptoms carefully, made sure they would mimic consumption. Wanted Sarah to suffer, wanted Jack to watch helplessly as his wife wasted away. Why? Jack's voice was hollow. Why make her suffer if you wanted the land? Why not just kill her quick? Because I wanted you to feel what I felt, helpless, watching someone die slowly and being unable to stop it. That's how I felt for 2 years after Little Bighorn, watching my leg rot, knowing I'd never be whole again. The confession continued. Wade Hoskins had killed Thomas Blackwater on Cutter's orders when the trader refused to help acquire land parcels. The barn fire had been planned for weeks. The forged documents had cost Cutter $5,000 to create, bribing a clerk in Maricopa County for authentic seals and stamps. And Ethan, Jack asked, how did you turn him? The boy was easy. He was angry and lonely and desperate to prove himself. I offered him what you couldn't, a future where he mattered, where he wasn't living in a dead woman's shadow. Cutter's voice held no triumph, only tired honesty. I manipulated a child because I thought it would hurt you, and it did, but it killed him instead. Jack's fists clenched. Every instinct screamed to reach through the bars to hurt Cutter the way Cutter had hurt everyone Jack loved. But he forced himself to remain still, to breathe, to listen. I'm pleading guilty, Cutter continued, to all of it. Murder, conspiracy, fraud. I'll hang, and I deserve it. But before I do, I need you to understand something. Little Bighorn broke me. Not the arrow, not the leg, not the pain. The belief that my best friend abandoned me. That broke something inside that never healed. I built a life on hate, and it consumed everything good I might have been. He looked directly at Jack. You didn't abandon me. I know that now. You tried to save me, and I told you to leave. The choice was mine as much as yours. But I couldn't accept responsibility for my own survival. So I blamed you, and I destroyed both our lives because of it. Why? Tell me this now. Because lies are exhausting. And I'm tired, Jack, tired of hating, tired of hurting people, tired of being the monster I became. So I'm telling the truth. Sarah died because of me. Thomas Blackwater died because of me. Ethan died because of me. And I'm sorry. It won't bring them back, and it won't save me from the noose. But I'm sorry. Jack stood, looked at the man who had been his brother, his friend, his enemy, saw not a monster, but something sadder. A human being who had made terrible choices and would pay the ultimate price. I forgive you, Jack said. Cutter's head snapped up, shocked. What? I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Because I need to let go of the hate before it does to me what it did to you. Sarah wouldn't want me to carry this poison. Ethan wouldn't want it. Hell, even you at your best wouldn't want it. Tears ran down Cutter's face. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway. Goodbye, Nathaniel. Jack walked out of the jail into the cold night air. Ayanna followed. They stood together in silence, processing what had just happened. That was brave, she said. That was necessary. For him and for me. Jack looked up at the stars, the same stars that had shone over Little Bighorn 5 years ago. The war is over, finally. They rode back to Shadow Creek Ranch as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and hope. September 25, 1881, Coconino County Courthouse, Flagstaff. The courtroom packed with 200 people standing room only, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder in the September heat. Every rancher within 50 miles had come. Every townsperson who had known Sarah Mercer. Reporters from as far as Phoenix and Tucson, scribbling notes for newspapers that would carry this story across the territory. They had come to see justice. Jack Mercer sat in the front row beside Ayanna Blackwater and Pete Dawson. His hands rested on his knees steady despite the rage that still simmered beneath his skin. He wore his only suit, the same one from his wedding photograph. It smelled of cedar and memory. Nathaniel Cutter sat at the defendant's table in iron shackles, his ruined hand wrapped in clean bandages. 2 armed deputies flanked him. He had refused a lawyer, refused to mount any defense, just sat there with empty eyes waiting for the inevitable. Judge Harrison Miller presided, a man of 60 with a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for corruption. He had traveled from the territorial capital specifically for this case. The crimes were too serious, too public to be handled by local magistrates who might be swayed by influence or fear. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Miller," the bailiff called. The room stood as one, the rustle of fabric, the creak of floorboards. Then silence as Judge Miller took his seat and surveyed the crowded courtroom with eyes that missed nothing. "Be seated. We are here today for the matter of Arizona Territory versus Nathaniel James Cutter. The defendant stands accused of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, arson, and attempted murder. Mr. Cutter, how do you plead?" Cutter stood slowly, leaning on the table for support. His voice carried clearly in the silent room. "Guilty, Your Honor, to all charges." A murmur ran through the crowd. Judge Miller's gavel cracked down. "Order. Mr. Cutter, you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to trial and place yourself at the mercy of this court for sentencing." "I understand." "Very well. Marshal Pierce, present the evidence." What followed was 3 hours of testimony that laid bare every detail of Cutter's crimes. Dr. Samuel Thorne took the stand, his voice shaking as he described how he had misdiagnosed Sarah Mercer's arsenic poisoning as consumption, how the symptoms aligned perfectly with chronic poisoning, how he had failed his patient through ignorance. "I will carry that failure for the rest of my life, Doctor." Thorne said, tears visible, "But I want this court to know that Sarah Mercer did not die of natural causes. She was murdered, slowly, deliberately, cruelly." Martha Chen presented her ledger showing Wade Hoskins purchasing large quantities of arsenic labeled as rat poison. The dates corresponded exactly with Sarah's illness. Her voice never wavered as she pointed at Cutter. "That man ordered my best friend's death. I want everyone here to know that. Sarah Mercer was murdered." Jack took the stand next. The prosecutor, a sharp young attorney named Robert Hayes, led him through the events of the past week: the barn fire, the forged documents, the ambush at Devil's Bridge, Ethan's betrayal and redemption and death. "Mr. Mercer, can you describe the last words your son Ethan spoke to you?" Jack's throat closed. The courtroom waited. Finally he managed, "He called me Papa. It was the first time, and the last." The sound of weeping rippled through the gallery. Women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Men looked away, jaws tight. Even Judge Miller blinked rapidly, though his expression remained stern. Ayanna testified about her husband Thomas's murder, about Wade Hoskins laughing as he shot an unarmed traitor, about losing her unborn child from the shock and trauma. Her voice stayed level, controlled, but her hands gripped the witness rail hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Chief Delche spoke through a translator, describing how Cutter's land schemes threatened Apache territory, how the railroad would bring more settlers and more displacement, how his warriors had fought alongside Jack Mercer because some white men understood that honor transcended race. The testimony continued. Ranch hands, townspeople, federal marshals, each adding another brick to the wall of evidence that buried Nathaniel Cutter under the weight of his crimes. Finally, Judge Miller called Cutter himself to speak. "Mr. Cutter, you have pleaded guilty to heinous crimes. Before I pass sentence, The court will hear any statement you wish to make." Cutter stood, looked at Jack, then addressed the courtroom. "I killed Sarah Mercer. I ordered Thomas Blackwater's murder. I burned Jack's barn and forged documents to steal his land. I manipulated a 16-year-old boy and got him killed. I did all of this because I was angry, because I blamed Jack Mercer for my injuries at Little Bighorn, because I let hate consume everything good I might have been." His voice cracked. "Jack tried to save me that day. I told him to leave me to save himself. The choice was mine as much as his. But I couldn't accept that. Couldn't accept that my suffering was just the random cruelty of war. I needed someone to blame. So I blamed Jack. And I destroyed both our lives because of it." Cutter turned to face Jack directly. "I'm sorry. Those words mean nothing, I know. They won't bring Sarah back. Won't bring Ethan back. Won't undo the pain I've caused. But they're all I have left to give. I'm sorry, Jack, for everything." Jack met his gaze, said nothing, just nodded once. The forgiveness had already been given in the jail cell. This was just the public acknowledgement of what they both knew. That hate had destroyed one man completely and nearly destroyed the other. Judge Miller's voice cut through the silence. "Nathaniel James Cutter, this court finds you guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, arson, fraud, and attempted murder. The penalty for these crimes is death by hanging." The gavel fell with the finality of a coffin lid closing. "Execution is set for October 2nd, 1881 at dawn. May God have mercy on your soul, though you showed none to your victims." Deputies led Cutter away in chains. He did not look back. The courtroom erupted in voices, some calling for justice, others simply exhaling relief that the monster was caged. Jack sat motionless. It was done. The legal battle was over. Cutter would hang in 1 week, and Sarah's murder would be avenged, and the law would have spoken, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion. Ayanna's hand found his under the wooden bench, squeezed gently. "It's over." "Is it?" "The trial is. The rest is up to us." Outside the courthouse, townspeople gathered to offer congratulations and condolences in equal measure. Jack shook hands, accepted thanks, heard his name spoken with respect instead of pity for the first time in 3 years. But he moved through it mechanically, desperate to escape the crowd and find silence. Pete drove them back to Shadow Creek Ranch in the wagon. Miguel sat in the bed, his leg healing slowly but surely. The sun was setting as they crested the final ridge and saw the ranch spread below them. The new barn stood solid and complete. Horses grazed in the repaired corrals. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney where Miguel's wife Rosa had dinner waiting. The land itself seemed unchanged by all the blood and violence and grief. Just dirt and grass and sky, indifferent and eternal. "Home," Pete said simply. And it was home. But it was also different now, changed by loss and struggle and the slow, painful work of healing. Over the next week, life found a rhythm. Jack rose before dawn to work the cattle. Ayanna tended her medicinal herb garden, teaching Rosa which plants could heal and which could harm. Pete managed the hands with his arm still in a sling, barking orders and cursing cheerfully. Miguel hobbled around on crutches, insisting he could still work despite everyone's protests. They did not speak of the execution scheduled for October 2nd, did not mark the days counting down. But everyone felt it hanging there, unfinished business, waiting to be closed. Jack found himself drawn to the 2 graves on the hill each evening, not to mourn exactly. More to report on the day's events, to share small victories and setbacks with people who could not hear, but whose memory still shaped everything he did. "The new barn holds 40% more hay," he told Sarah's Stone on the 5th evening. "You would approve of the efficiency." And the Martinez family sent over 3 laying hens as thanks for helping with their well. Rosa is already planning what to bake. He turned to Ethan's grave. "Pete says I'm working too hard again. Says I need to remember to live, not just work. He's probably right. He usually is. He's definitely right." Jack turned. Ayanna stood 10 feet away, holding 2 cups of coffee. She had moved so quietly he had not heard her approach. An Apache skill, that silence. "How long have you been there? Long enough to hear you talking to ghosts." She handed him a cup, sat beside him on the grass. "Do they answer back?" "Sometimes. In my head." Sarah usually tells me I'm being stubborn. Ethan usually wants to know if I'm proud of him. And are you proud of him? More than I can say. He made mistakes, but he died trying to fix them. That takes courage most grown men don't have. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the sun paint the mountains purple and gold. This had become their ritual over the past week. Small moments of quiet connection that said more than words could. "Tomorrow is the execution," Ayanna said finally. "Yes." "Will you go?" Jack considered. Part of him wanted to witness Cutter's death to see justice physically manifested, but another part, the part that Sarah's memory still guided, knew that watching a man hang would not heal anything, would not bring anyone back, would just be more death added to an already heavy ledger. "No, I don't need to see him die. I just need him gone." "Good. Then we can spend tomorrow working on the irrigation ditch, the one you and Sarah planned but never built." Jack looked at her. "How did you know about that?" "Pete told me. Said Sarah wanted to divert water from Shadow Creek to expand the vegetable garden, make the ranch more self-sufficient. It was one of her last projects. She drew up plans but got sick before we could start digging." Jack smiled slightly. She was always thinking ahead, always planning for a future she didn't get to see. "Then we'll build it for her, make her vision real." The simplicity of it struck Jack deeply. Not grand gestures or monuments, just finishing what Sarah had started, honoring her by continuing her work. "I'd like that." That night Jack slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. No nightmares of Little Bighorn, no visions of Sarah dying, no guilt crushing his chest until he woke, gasping. Just deep restorative sleep that left him feeling almost human when dawn came. October 2nd broke clear and cold. Jack did not think about Nathaniel Cutter standing on a scaffold in Flagstaff. Did not imagine the noose that dropped the snap. Instead, he took shovel and pickaxe to the area Sarah had marked on her old plans and started digging. Ayanna worked beside him. Then Pete joined them, one-armed but determined. Miguel hobbled over and directed from a chair, his knowledge of water flow proving invaluable. By afternoon, a dozen townspeople had arrived to help. Men who had come to the barn raising, women who had brought food to the funeral. They worked together through the day, digging and leveling and lining the ditch with stones. As the sun set, water from Shadow Creek began flowing through the new channel, spreading life to soil that had been waiting. "Sarah would have loved this," Pete said, leaning on his shovel. "All these people working together, building something that will last." Jack watched the water flow clear and cold and pure. She would have. She always believed community mattered more than individual pride. That night they gathered around a bonfire in the ranch yard. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else had whiskey. Stories were told, songs were sung. Laughter rang out under stars that had witnessed everything and judged nothing. Jack found himself sitting next to Ayanna, their shoulders touching in the firelight. She had dirt under her nails and sunburn on her nose, and she looked more beautiful than anyone he had ever seen. "Thank you," he said quietly, words meant only for her. "For what? For staying. For fighting beside me. For helping me remember how to live." Ayanna turned to face him, her eyes reflecting firelight. "I stayed because I chose to. Because for the first time in 2 years, I found someone who understood what it means to survive loss. Because you make me believe that maybe broken things can heal if given time. I want to ask you something, but I need to do it right, not in the middle of chaos or grief, when things are settled. Ask me now." Now. Yes, now. Because life is not about perfect timing. It's about choosing to move forward even when you're scared. Jack took her hand. Rough calluses met rough calluses. Two people who had worked and fought and bled and survived. "Ayanna Blackwater, would you consider staying at Shadow Creek Ranch, not as a guest or a hired hand, as my partner in everything? Are you asking me to marry you? Eventually, yes. But first I'm asking if you'll share this life with me. Build something new from the ashes of what we both lost. See if two broken people can make something whole together." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. The fiddle played on. People laughed and talked around them. The world continued turning. Then she smiled. That rare transformative smile that lit her face from within. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll build with you. I'll see where this leads." Jack felt something in his chest that he had not felt in 3 years. Not just hope, joy. The simple joy of connection and possibility and a future that held more than just survival. He wanted to kiss her. But this was not the moment. Not with the whole town watching and the memories of Sarah and Thomas still so fresh. So instead, he squeezed her hand and smiled back and let the moment be what it was. A beginning, small and fragile and real. Chief Delche arrived the next morning with 4 Apache elders. They came bearing gifts. Woven blankets, dried herbs, a beautiful bow made of juniper wood. But more than that, they came bearing recognition. "My daughter has chosen well," Delche said, speaking in Apache, while Ayanna translated. "This man honors his word. He fought beside us. He protects this land from those who would destroy it. The Apache will call him friend." They performed a brief ceremony, burning sage and speaking words that blessed the union between worlds. Delche placed his hand on Jack's shoulder, looked him in the eye, and said in careful English, "You are family now. My daughter's family is my family." Jack's throat closed with emotion. After years of isolation, of being the widower, no one knew how to talk to acceptance felt like rain on drought-parched earth. As Delche and his elders departed, Ayanna stood beside Jack, watching them go. "My father has not spoken to me kindly in 3 years. You gave me my family back. You did that yourself, by being strong enough to build bridges between worlds." The days that followed settled into something resembling normal life. Jack worked the ranch with Pete and Miguel. Ayanna established herself as the valley's healer people, coming from miles around for her remedies and wisdom. The Apache and the white ranchers began trading more freely, old suspicions easing in the face of common cause. Word came from Flagstaff that Nathaniel Cutter had been hanged at dawn on October 2nd. He had died without struggle, accepting his fate with the same exhausted resignation he had shown in court. Wade Hoskins and 3 other men were sentenced to territorial prison for 20 years each. Sheriff Cooper lost his badge and faced trial for corruption. Justice had been served. The legal matters were closed, but the healing was just beginning. 1 month after the trial, Jack stood on the hill between the 2 graves and spoke to Sarah for what he knew would be the last time like this. "I'm going to ask Ayanna to marry me properly, with a ring and a proposal and everything you would have wanted. I hope that's all right. I hope you understand that loving her doesn't mean I loved you less. It just means I'm choosing to live again instead of dying slowly with you." The wind moved through the grass. The October sun warmed his face, and Jack felt for the first time since Sarah's death that the conversation was finished. Not because he was forgetting her, but because he was finally ready to move forward while keeping her memory safe. He turned to Ethan's grave. "I'm going to make you proud, son. I'm going to build the kind of life you would have wanted. The kind of home where people matter more than land, where family is chosen, not just inherited, where mistakes can be forgiven and second chances are real." Jack walked down the hill toward the ranch where Ayanna was teaching Rosa how to make poultices from yarrow and honey, where Pete was arguing cheerfully with Miguel about the best way to train a new horse, where smoke rose from the chimney of a house that was finally becoming a home again. The past would always be part of him. Sarah and Ethan and even Nathaniel Cutter had shaped who he was, but they would not define who he would become. That choice was his alone. And for the first time in 3 years, Jack Mercer chose life. December 24th, 1881, Shadow Creek Ranch. Snow fell soft and silent over the Arizona high country, rare but welcome. The ranch lay blanketed in white, transforming the desert landscape into something from a storybook. Icicles hung from the eaves of the new barn like crystal teeth. Smoke rose from 3 chimneys, the main house and the bunkhouse, and the small cabin Jack had built over the past 2 months. Ayanna's cabin. Though she spent most nights in the main house, now propriety demanded separate quarters until the wedding. The town of Flagstaff had already raised eyebrows at a white rancher courting an Apache widow. Jack would not give them ammunition by flouting convention, no matter how outdated those conventions felt. He stood on the porch of the main house, watching dawn break over Mingus Mountain, Christmas Eve. 4 months since the trial. 3 months since Cutter's execution. 2 months since he had formally asked Chief Delche for permission to marry his daughter. 1 day until the wedding. "You're up early," Pete said, emerging from the bunkhouse with a steaming cup of coffee. His shoulder had healed enough to work without the sling, though he still favored it on cold mornings. Nervous, terrified. "Good. Means you're taking it seriously." Pete handed Jack the coffee, pulled his coat tighter against the December chill. "Sarah would approve, you know, of Ayanna, of you moving forward." "How can you be sure?" "Because I knew Sarah as well as anyone except you, and she wasn't the kind of woman who'd want you mourning forever. She'd want you happy, building something, living." Jack sipped the coffee, letting the heat spread through his chest. "I keep thinking about the first time I met Sarah, how she saw something worth saving in a broken drunk, how she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now Ayanna's doing the same thing, helping you believe again. That's not replacing Sarah Boss. That's honoring what she taught you about love and second chances." Movement caught Jack's eye. Ayanna emerged from her cabin wrapped in a blanket against the cold. Even in the gray dawn light, even bundled against winter, she moved with that particular grace that made his breath catch. She saw him watching, smiled, raised a hand in greeting. Jack waved back. Such a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived together. The cougar hunt, the barn fire, Devil's Bridge, the trial. All the small daily choices to keep building instead of surrendering to grief. "I'm going to make her happy," Jack said quietly. "However many years we have, I'm going to make sure she knows she chose right." "I know you will. Now come on, we've got a wedding to prepare for and about 6 inches of snow to clear before guests arrive tomorrow." The ranch exploded into controlled chaos as the day progressed. Rosa and 3 women from town took over the kitchen, preparing enough food to feed 50 people. Miguel directed the hands in clearing paths and setting up tables despite his legs still being in a brace. Pete supervised the hanging of lanterns in the barn where the ceremony would take place. Jack spent the morning checking and rechecking details. The ring he had ordered from a jeweler in Phoenix, simple silver, with a small turquoise stone. The suit he had bought in Flagstaff, the first new clothes he had purchased in 5 years. The vows he had written and rewritten a dozen times, trying to capture feelings too large for words. Chief Delche arrived at noon with 20 Apache, including Ayanna's 2 brothers and her grandmother, ancient and wise and still sharp-eyed at 85. They brought gifts, blankets woven with traditional patterns, a beaded belt for Ayanna. For Jack, a knife with a handle carved from elk antler, the blade engraved with Apache symbols for strength and protection. "My daughter deserves a warrior," Delche said, presenting the knife. "You have proven yourself worthy. But know this, if you fail her, if you break her heart, the Apache will know, and we will come." Jack accepted the knife, felt its perfect balance. "I will not fail her. This I swear on everything I hold sacred." Delche studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Now we prepare for tomorrow. In Apache tradition, the groom must prove his commitment through ceremony. Are you willing? What do I need to do?" What followed was 4 hours of ritual that left Jack exhausted, humbled, and strangely cleansed. He fasted while the Apache elders sang traditional songs. He sat in a sweat lodge while they spoke of marriage and responsibility and the sacred bond between man and woman. He listened to stories of Ayanna's childhood, her strength, her losses, her journey. Finally, as the sun set, they brought him to the creek where ice formed at the edges, but the center still ran clear and cold. Delche stood on the bank with his elders. "Remove your shirt. Enter the water." Jack stripped to the waist, the December air biting his skin. He stepped into Shadow Creek. The cold was shocking, stealing his breath, turning his muscles to stone. But he waded deeper until the water reached his chest. "This water is life," Delche called out. "It cleanses the old, makes way for the new. Tomorrow you marry my daughter. Tonight you wash away what was and prepare for what will be." Jack submerged completely. The cold drove into his skull like ice picks. Every nerve screamed. But he stayed under, counting heartbeats, letting the water do its work. When he surfaced, gasping, something had shifted. He felt lighter, cleaner. as if the creek had carried away 3 years of accumulated grief and guilt, leaving space for something new to grow. The elders pulled him out, wrapped him in blankets, led him to a fire where Ayanna waited. She wore traditional Apache dress, deerskin decorated with beads and quills. Her hair hung loose down her back. She looked like something from legend, beautiful and fierce and real. "You survived," she said with a slight smile. "Barely. Your father is trying to kill me before the wedding. He's testing you, making sure you're strong enough for what comes next." "And am I?" Ayanna stepped closer, took his freezing hands in hers. "You fought a mountain lion, survived a barn fire, stood against 25 armed men, forgave the man who murdered your wife. Yes, Jack Mercer, you're strong enough." That night Jack barely slept, not from nerves exactly, from anticipation. From the strange feeling that tomorrow would mark a true beginning, not just for him, but for something larger. A bridge between worlds. A statement that hate and division could be overcome, that love could triumph over loss. Christmas Day, 1881 dawned clear and brilliant. The snow stopped falling, leaving everything crystalline and perfect. Guests began arriving at 10 o'clock. Ranchers from across the valley, townspeople from Flagstaff, Dr. Thorne and Martha Chen and Tobias Harrington, the federal marshal who had helped bring Cutter to justice, Miguel's extended family, 12 strong, even the reverend who had buried Ethan come to witness a very different kind of ceremony. The Apache arrived in ceremonial dress, a display of culture and pride that made several white guests uncomfortable. But Chief Delshay's presence commanded respect. No one dared object. At noon they gathered in the new barn. Sarah's barn, the plaque declared. Lanterns hung from every beam, casting warm light that drove back the winter shadows. Someone had decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. The smell of fresh-cut wood and evergreen filled the air. Jack stood at the front wearing his new suit, hands clasped to hide their trembling. Pete stood beside him as best man. Miguel and 3 other ranch hands served as witnesses. Then Ayanna appeared at the barn door. She wore white, not traditional Apache dress. A simple gown that Martha Chen had helped her sew, practical but beautiful. Her long black hair was braided with white flowers. She carried no bouquet, just her father's hand as he walked her down the aisle between rows of benches. Every eye in the barn turned to watch. White and Apache, rancher and townsperson, all united in witnessing this moment, this choice, this declaration that the old hatreds and divisions need not define the future. Jack's throat closed. She was stunning, but more than that, she was his. And he was hers. 2 broken people choosing to build something whole together. Chief Delshay brought Ayanna to Jack, placed her hand in his. "You ask for my daughter. I give her freely with my blessing. Honor her, protect her, love her as she deserves." "I will. This I swear." Delshay stepped back. The Reverend stepped forward, opened his Bible, and began the ceremony. The words washed over Jack in a blur. He heard himself respond at the proper times, heard Ayanna's clear voice making her vows. But mostly, he was aware of her hand in his, warm and calloused and real. Then came time for personal vows. Jack pulled a folded paper from his pocket hands, shaking slightly as he unfolded it. "Ayanna, 4 months ago, you saved my life. But you did more than that. You saved me from a slower death, the kind that happens when a man stops living and just goes through motions. You taught me that survival is not the same as life, that grief is not the same as love, that broken things can heal if given patience and care." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, continued. "I cannot promise I won't make mistakes. I cannot promise there won't be hard days, but I promise to stand beside you through all of it, to honor your strength, to bridge the worlds we both walk between, to build a future worthy of everyone we've lost. I choose you, Ayanna Blackwater, today and all my tomorrows." Ayanna's eyes shone with unshed tears. She had no paper, no prepared words, just truth spoken from the heart. "Jack Mercer, when I pulled that arrow from the cougar's skull, I thought I was just doing what was right. I did not know I was saving the man I would love, the man who would remind me that my heart could still feel something besides pain. You have given me a home when I belonged nowhere, a family when I was alone, a reason to hope when hope seemed foolish. A tear escaped, ran down her cheek. I choose you, not because you are perfect, but because you are real, because you understand loss and still choose to build, because you make me believe that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. I choose you, and I will keep choosing you every day we have." The Reverend smiled. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jack, you may kiss your bride." Jack cupped Ayanna's face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Then he kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. The barn erupted in applause and cheers. Apache war cries mixed with white congratulations. Music started, fiddles and drums creating something new from the blending of traditions. The celebration lasted into the night. Food and drink and dancing, stories told and retold. Pete got drunk and cried openly, declaring he had never been so happy. Rosa sang Mexican love songs that made everyone weep. Chief Delche performed an Apache blessing that wished the couple many children and long life. As midnight approached, Jack and Ayanna slipped away from the celebration. They walked through fresh snow to the hill where two graves stood silent under starlight. "I wanted them here," Jack said quietly. "Sarah and Ethan, I wanted them to be part of this." "They were. I felt them." Ayanna knelt, placed her hand on Sarah's headstone. "Thank you for loving him first, for teaching him that broken things can heal, for showing him what marriage should be. I will honor what you built, I promise." She moved to Ethan's grave. "And you, brave boy, you died saving your father, died becoming the man you were meant to be. We will remember you, always." Jack knelt beside her, one hand on each grave. "I'm moving forward, but I'm bringing you both with me, in memory, in lessons learned, in the way I'll love Ayanna and any children we might have. You're part of the foundation we're building on. Thank you for that." They stood together looking out over Shadow Creek Ranch, the barn glowing with lantern light, the main house where they would sleep tonight as husband and wife for the first time. The land stretching away into darkness, full of possibility. "Are you happy?" Ayanna asked. Jack thought about it, really considered. 3 years ago, happiness had seemed impossible. A month ago, it seemed unlikely. But standing here now, hand in hand with this woman, looking at the life they were building together, he felt something he had not felt since Sarah's death: peace. "Yes," he said, "I'm happy. Are you?" "More than I thought possible. More than I deserve." "You deserve everything good this world has to offer." They walked back to the house through snow that sparkled under starlight. Tomorrow they would start their life together in earnest. But tonight was just for them, for quiet joy and gentle discovery and the simple comfort of not being alone. Years passed. Spring 1882 brought new life. Ayanna discovered she was pregnant in March. The news spread through the valley like wildfire, celebrated by Apache and white settlers alike. This child would be a symbol, people said, a bridge between worlds made flesh. Jack spent those months in a state of terrified joy, building a cradle from cherry wood, preparing a nursery in the room that had been closed since Sarah's death, learning everything he could about pregnancy and childbirth from Dr. Thorne and the Apache midwives. In November, Ayanna gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, 36 hours, that aged Jack a decade. But when he finally held his daughter, tiny and perfect, and screaming with life, every moment of fear dissolved into pure love. They named her Sarah Hope Mercer. Sarah for the wife he had lost, hope for the future they were building. Chief Delche wept when he held his granddaughter, this child of two worlds. "She will be strong," he declared, "like her mother, like her father. She will build bridges where others build walls." The ranch prospered. Jack and Ayanna ran it as true partners, her knowledge of the land and its plants complementing his management skills. They expanded the cattle operation, added sheep, cultivated medicinal herbs that Ayanna sold across the territory. Shadow Creek Ranch became known as a place where Apache and white worked side by side, where old divisions mattered less than good work and fair treatment. Pete stayed on as foreman until his death in 1889 at age 73. He died in his sleep peacefully, having seen Jack happy and settled and surrounded by family. They buried him on the hill next to Sarah and Ethan, adding another grave to the collection of people who had shaped Shadow Creek Ranch into what it became. Miguel raised 5 children on the ranch, all of them learning ranching from Jack and healing from Ayanna. The youngest, a daughter named Sarah, after Jack's daughter, became the territory's first female Apache physician, blending traditional medicine with modern practices. More children came, a son in 1884 named Thomas for Ayanna's first husband, twin daughters in 1887, each birth a miracle, each child raised to understand both Apache and white traditions, to walk between worlds with confidence and grace. But the world beyond Shadow Creek Ranch continued changing, not always for the better. In 1890, a letter arrived from Washington, D.C. The Department of Interior was proposing new regulations. All Apache in Arizona Territory would be relocated to the San Carlos Reservation. No exceptions. The land they had lived on for generations would be opened to white settlement. Jack read the letter 3 times, fury building with each word. He looked at Ayanna, saw the same anger reflected in her eyes. "They want to move your father's people, take their land. Again." "Yes." "What do we do?" Ayanna's jaw set. In that particular way he had learned meant she was preparing for war. "We fight. You promised my father you would stand between the railroad and Apache land. Now you keep that promise." Jack looked at his children playing in the yard. Sarah Hope was 8, now teaching her younger siblings to track rabbits. Thomas was 6, already showing skill with horses. The twins were 3, wild and fearless. He thought about Ethan, who had died at 16 fighting for what was right. About Sarah, who had believed community mattered more than individual gain. About Nathaniel Cutter, consumed by hate until it destroyed him. "Then we fight," Jack said. "Together." Epilogue. Spring 1906, Jack Mercer sat on the porch of Shadow Creek Ranch watching his grandchildren play in the yard where he had once fought for survival. He was 71 years old now, hair-white hands gnarled with arthritis. But his eyes were clear and his mind sharp. Ayanna sat beside him in her rocking chair, 67, and still beautiful, still fierce, still the woman who had saved his life a quarter-century ago. The ranch spread before them, transformed but recognizable. The barn, Sarah's name graced, still stood solid. The irrigation ditch they had built together still brought water to expanded gardens. The main house had been added onto 3 times to accommodate growing family. Their daughter, Sarah Hope, lived in Flagstaff now with her husband and 3 children. She had become a lawyer fighting for Apache land rights in territorial courts. Thomas ran the ranch with his wife, managing an operation 10 times larger than what Jack had started with. The twins had married brothers from a neighboring ranch, creating alliances that strengthened the whole valley. Chief Delche had died in 1895 at age 84, having lived long enough to see his great-grandchildren. His grave stood on the hill beside the others, a testament to bridges built and hatreds overcome. The Apache had fought the relocation order. With Jack's testimony, Sarah Hope's legal work and support from sympathetic federal officials, they had won partial victory. Some land was lost. But a portion remained in Apache hands, including the sacred sites and hunting grounds. It was not perfect, but it was better than it might have been. "What are you thinking about?" Ayanna asked, her voice still rich despite age. "Everything. How far we've come, how much we've built, how many people live better lives because you pulled an arrow out of a cougar 25 years ago. We built it together, you and me and everyone who chose hope over hate." Jack looked at the hill where 6 graves stood. Sarah and Ethan and Pete and Delche and 2 Apache warriors who had fallen at Devil's Bridge, all of them part of the foundation that Shadow Creek Ranch was built on. "Do you ever regret it, marrying me, dealing with all the judgment and difficulty?" Ayanna laughed, the sound like water over stones. "Not for 1 second. You gave me a family when I had none, a purpose when I was lost, children and grandchildren who carry both worlds forward. No, Jack Mercer, I regret nothing." She reached over, took his weathered hand in hers. 25 years of marriage, and her touch still made his heart beat faster. "I love you," he said. Simple words. But they contained everything. Every day they had fought for, every loss they had survived, every joy they had built together. I love you too. Always have. Always will. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast. As he drew closer, Jack recognized his grandson Michael, Sarah Hope's eldest boy. The young man dismounted, excitement clear on his face. "Grandpa, Grandma, did you hear Arizona is going to become a state? They're voting on it next month." "A state," Jack repeated. "Not a territory anymore." "And Aunt Sarah says when it happens she's going to run for the state legislature. First Apache woman to try. She says it's time for new voices in government." Jack and Ayanna looked at each other, pride and hope mixing in equal measure. Their daughter. Their fierce, brilliant daughter, who had been born from the ashes of tragedy and raised to believe she could change the world. "Tell your aunt she has our full support," Ayanna said, "and that her grandfather Delche would be so proud." As the sun set over Shadow Creek Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jack Mercer thought about the journey that had brought him here, from Little Bighorn to Sarah's death, to the barn fire to Devil's Bridge. Every loss, every fight, every choice had led to this moment. An old man on a porch with the woman he loved, surrounded by family and legacy and hope for the future. "We did good," he said quietly. "We did," Ayanna agreed. "And they'll keep doing good long after we're gone. That's what legacy means. Not land or money, but the values we pass down, the bridges we build, the love that survives us." The last light faded from the Arizona sky. Stars began appearing, the same stars that had watched Jack pull an arrow from a cougar, that had witnessed a barn burning, that had shone over Devil's Bridge, where good men died and evil men were defeated. The same stars that would keep watching long after Jack and Ayanna were gone. Watching their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carry forward the simple truth they had learned through blood and fire and love. That broken things can heal. That hate destroys, but love builds. That tomorrow is always worth fighting for. Jack Mercer closed his eyes, Ayanna's hand warm in his, and felt something he had not felt since Sarah first smiled at him in a Flagstaff schoolhouse 30 years ago. Complete. Not perfect, not without scars, but complete. And that was enough. That was everything. The end.